Welcome. Really excited to start this online webinar tonight for the Greater Gariwerd Landscape Draft Management Plan. We've got people trickling in as we go, but we're going to start the event and, really excited to start talking to you about this topic. Before I begin too much, I want to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the various lands that I'm sure we are meeting on today. But in particular, I want to pay my respects to the Jabberung and the Jardwajali people of the Gariwerd landscape, as that is a landscape we're here to talk about. I want to acknowledge their over 20,000 years of connection to this country and also their continuing role and right to care for the country. Also today, we've got a few people online. I'm your host. My name is Cole and I'll be leading you through the discussion. We've got the Director of Park Planning and Policy here today, Stu Hughes, and you'll see him soon on the video. And we've also got the Manager of Park Planning, Josh Jacuzzi. We've got a few other Parks Victoria staff helping us out in the background who may pop in and out as we go, but they're the two people who are predominantly going to present to you today. In terms of agenda, we've got the acknowledgements at the start. We've got an overview of the draft plan to share with you. We'll allow questions and answers and we'll share how to provide feedback and next steps. The predominant purpose of today is just to provide you with more information about what's in the plan, what's proposed. It's to give you an opportunity to ask us questions so that you can understand greater all the different strategies and why they're there, and support you to then make feedback either through a survey or a submission online. We do have some note taking happening today, but predominantly we'll ask you to provide feedback through the official channels. Just quickly, some of you may have been on a live event before, some of you may have not. There is the option to ask us a question throughout the presentation. Those questions, they come to us first and then we publish them. So sometimes if there's a lag between your question being submitted and it going up, please don't worry, it will be there. And then once we finish the presentation, I'll be going through the questions and, sharing them with the various team members who are best placed to answer them. There might be questions that we cannot get to today, we don't have an answer to or are slightly out of scope. We will take those on notice and we'll commit, like we did with the last round of engagement, to sharing afterwards a revised set of FAQs that reflect those questions. We just want to start, open at the start around how we hope to conduct this discussion today. We'd really like to engage in a respectful discussion and we really ask for constructive questions about the plan, what's in it and why, how you can find out more information. We ask that we are mainly written feedback today, but we ask in comments not to criticise the opinions of others and instead share your opinions respectfully. We also want to start a dialogue about creating a culturally safe space for traditional owners to participate in sessions like these. So if you're wondering what that means, it means not questioning or denying their identity and connection to this landscape, respecting their right to make decisions for the future of country and listening and learning about the cultural significance of Gariwerd. We do have a video to share today that provides some really great information that helps us all learn about the significance and the amazing connection that many people have to this landscape over time. Before I hand it over to Stu, I just want to touch as well, I know there's a lot going on in this slide, materials will be provided afterwards, but on the journey that we've gone to so far, this has been quite a shortened plan development process for us. Last year in May, the Minister announced a new plan was being developed, and in that time we've gone through quite a few steps. So at first, we had to determine the project and the scope, and we've been working with traditional owners right from the start on this. They've been part of the project governance and decision-making processes. We had an early stage of engagement last year in September, October. I'm sure many of you were there. We were in many workshops. I think we had 270 people come to workshops. We had lots of online engagement and lots of interest. So thank everyone for their feedback, and the reports of those are available. In that time since then, from November to essentially now, we've done research, field studies, lots of evidence gathering. We developed options with traditional owners. And then, of course, when you've got a 159-page document, quite a bit of time writing the documents and producing maps. In October, the plan was approved by the Parks Victoria Board and the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change as a draft. We'll reiterate many times today, this is a draft, so that we can come out to you now, present that draft, present the proposals and hear your feedback. We'll talk more about the process for feedback, but it's quite extensive, 10 weeks. We've got several online discussions like this to help people keep informed. And then there'll be a final 2 steps around reviewing the feedback. There'll be the report made of all the feedback, making any needed amendments to the plan with traditional owners, and then the final plan will be approved again by the Parks Victoria Board and the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change. It's been a wealth of work, and we hope that you've had a chance perhaps to see some of it online on the Engage Victoria platform. We hope you enjoy the presentation today, ask lots of questions, and of course we'll remind you of the process and where else you can find more information. Stu, I'm going to throw to you in a second. And he's going to, again, Stu Hughes is the Director of Policy and Planning at Parks Victoria, and he's going to talk you through what's proposed in the plan. But before I get to that, actually, I'm going to share a video with you that was being prepared. You may have seen it online. And we hear from the 3 traditional owner corporations in this. Bear with me for a moment. I'm hearing that there is no sound. Apologies. It may be, I'm not entirely sure how to support that. I'm really sorry. We'll post a link to it. We'll make an announcement. We'll post a link to it in the chat so you can watch it yourself. The purpose of the video just talks about the cultural connection to the landscape and also the purpose of the plan and what we hope to achieve. So we'll make sure that we share that with you. Apologies, we're all still learning in this online environment, and at times it can still be a bit tricky. So Stu, I'll hand over to you to start sharing about the plan.
Thanks, Cole. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm Stuart Hughes. I'm the Director of Park Planning and Policy with Parks Victoria, and I'm thrilled to be able to go through what is a very significant plan for the future of Victoria and the significant landscape that is Gariwerd. Unfortunately, you couldn't hear from that video. There's quite powerful messages and insights from our traditional owner partners. Similar to Cole, I wanted to pay my respects to traditional owners and acknowledge them. Through the plan, we have the tremendous privilege to be able to spend time with traditional owners, the knowledge holders, the people that have lived and breathed the landscape for tens of thousands of years and really understand country, understand the park, and what the video talked about was bringing together the connection of everyone now into what the future for the place can be. So I wanted to pay my respects and acknowledge traditional owners. We're going to go through a bit about what the plan is and step through some of the key themes and strategies. But the first slide here, we just really wanted to reinforce it's a draft plan, as Cole said. It's a pivotal part of the planning process to be able to frame up what the concepts, information we've gathered, what does that all mean, and through the draft is test those concepts with the community and hear more insights and ideas and concerns. and to help us then have a really, I guess, enduring plan that will really guide the future of the landscape. The plan, and we'll cover a map in a minute, covers the broad landscape. So it features the Grampians or Gariwerd National Park, Black Range State Park, but also other parks and reserves in the surrounding area, and we'll show that. So a lot of the strategies and aims that we'll go through do apply over more areas than just Grampians itself. We're building on, the plan is built on conversations we've had with community. We ran engagement sessions about a year ago, September, I think, last year, and had lots of conversations with partners and stakeholders since. So we're hoping that it builds on ideas that you may have heard at engagement sessions, or most importantly, you're able to help us now with your insights and ideas. And we'll go through at the end. We've got an extensive period for consultation to hear your views and have plenty of opportunities to have engagement in coming weeks. Thanks, Cole. As I've touched on, the development of the plan is an absolute partnership between Parks Victoria and the 3 traditional owner communities. The logos down the bottom there. The plan is a very very strong in the forward and in a lot of the narrative around the cultural landscape, where it's in traditional owner voice about what has tens of thousands mean for people and the landscape, and in particular, what's the last couple of 100 years mean for change for how new people in the landscape. What has changed from, I guess, new plants, new animals, new activities. So really, if people do have the chance, and I implore you, read the plan from end to end. A lot of narrative from the forward and early sections that is very much the traditional owner insights and their aspirations for the future. Furthermore, we've got the plan is bringing together a lot of government policy, a lot of law in how Aboriginal rights are protected, Aboriginal values are protected, and it's a really important point. There's a management plan for a landscape is always a combination of the biophysical, the plants, the animals, the landscape, but also people, and the traditional owner dimension to a management plan only enriches it, but it's also making sure it's delivering on the inherent rights that traditional owners have to continue to care for country. And as I said, it's been an absolute partnership in how the plan has been developed. So that's not, there's no consultation or whatever, it's an absolute empowered partnership. So anything you see in here is as equal between Parks Victoria and traditional owners in setting the directions, the draft directions, and what's been led to those directions. Thanks, Cole. Just a representation from the plan about the areas that are covered. So we've got a 180,000 hectare landscape we're looking at. It covers all the parks and reserves managed by Parks Victoria. It has regard for other areas like State Forest and the like, and a lot of the strategies and directions are as much about community in surrounding areas, not just the actual parks and reserves that Parks Victoria is privileged to be the land manager, but wanted to give a sense of the scale of the plan and also those other places that might be of interest to yourselves. Thanks, Cole. Now, before I get into the actual plan itself, a management plan is an incredibly important document and tool for the future of the landscape and the parks and reserves. As I've touched on already, in primacy, it's delivering on what the laws mean for the protection of natural and cultural values, and delivers on government policy. And one you would already picking up is around government's self-determination policy for traditional owners. So our job as planners is to understand what all those laws and regulations mean and be able to articulate that through the plan, building on where we've got knowledge about things like plants, animals, how people recreate, and in weaving in other strategies that other government partners do, and understand, all right, what's being protected, and then creating a vision for what the future of the landscape is to be. So really trying to set a future, not just what is happening now, but really see what change and growth and other how the communities may evolve, and also how the park may evolve. And then what it does is giving a great framework to hear the ideas of people about how they want to enjoy the landscape. How do you want to feel connected? How do you want to learn more about the landscape? How do you want to make sure your business is thriving and successful as part of a nature-based tourism offer? If you're surrounding the park, how are the fire management strategies going to impact safe communities? So the strategies is where we're really keen to hear. Have they been the combination of protecting what's important, but also allowing and supporting activity and use? And then finally, it's the basis, that the rules for the park. So where things can happen, when they can happen, as well as where we're going to put proactive programs in place, such as education programs. So it's a combination of applying all of those directions all the way through to the day-to-day management of the park. Thanks, Cole. And I've touched on already, a real challenge for the planning process is understanding what all the laws and regulations are. And on this screen, just trying to give a sense of the diversity of them that are at play. In particular, land-based acts like the National Parks Act, social ones around things like Aboriginal Heritage Act to protect the rights of the culture of traditional owners, and some that are Commonwealth legislation, some state legislation. So thanks, Cole. Now getting to the plan itself. We've got a vision in the draft plan. It's an extensive vision. It's probably about 2/3 of a page long, so we didn't aim to put it up on the screen here. Encourage you to read it. But the bold text there is summarising it. So it's about celebrating Gariwerd as a traditional owner cultural landscape, and welcomes the whole community to protect, value and respect country. Acknowledge, appreciate that's a very much lens that the cultural landscape is something that might be new to people, or you'll hear a lot from us about a cultural landscape being that combination of the natural, the cultural, the intangible heritage that goes with the landscape, and that's at the fore through the whole plan. So, but other point there, the vision is what's guiding all of our themes and strategies. So it's a really important piece to read as you're taking the whole draft management plan. Thanks, Cole. Now the plan's arranged in 4 chapters. The first one, you've heard a lot already from me about that cultural landscape, and making sure that landscape is understood, protected and can change over time as well. The second one's about healthy country. So this prominently is all the strategies to protect the plants, animals, the geology, the water flowing through the landscape, how we're managing fire in the landscape. So making sure that those, what is really special and significant about Gariwerd, the natural landscape is only protected and can change over time. Experiencing Gariwerd is about how any of us can enjoy, connect, appreciate the landscape. So all of the reasons people might visit the area, go for a bushwalk, go rock climbing, bird watching. The Experiencing Gariwerd section really goes through those recreational activities, those services that are supporting tourism and the like. So really important, and a lot of the commentary that we're hearing already, we're talking to people about, is about those recreational activities. And the last one is how we bring it all together, how we continue to learn about the park, the landscape, the people who enjoy it, how that's informing our ongoing management, as well as the partnerships that we want more of, we want stronger ones, about how are we implementing change, how are we protecting the park, how are people feeling really connected to the park and the landscape. So that last section is a bit about how we're implementing the previous 3 sections. Thanks, Cole. So just going through one slide for each of those sections there. So some of the proposed strategies around the cultural landscape is recognising it first and foremost. A bit of what I've articulated there, but it's compelling reading in the draft plan to see and hear through the words what the cultural landscape means for the traditional owners and how the landscape has been over tens of thousands of years. So some great information, really great information about what the creation of the landscape is, the intangible heritage, the creator stories, how to read the landscape, the night skies, the features within the park through that sort of lens of what the intangible heritage is in the landscape, and providing people like myself the opportunity to connect with that, connect with that information. An important part of the plan is to look at renaming features, renaming the park, renaming features in the park to traditional owner names as a recognition, and also to help anyone in the community connect with that name. And the more you understand what that name means and represents, it's only gives you a deeper connection to the landscape. The plan does recognise also there's lots of we've got 3 different traditional owner communities. Lots of time needs to be spent with traditional owners to understand what is the appropriate name for any feature, any part of the park, any part of the landscape. So we propose lots of names, but we also need to spend more time to understand what those names could or should be. The support traditional owner access to country is not just about what the landscape has been, but how traditional owners can continue customary practices. They can continue to modify the landscape so it can continue to be as it has, and how it's resilient and culturally appropriate into the future. So, and also time for traditional owner communities to be together on country. Brambuck is a really important focus in the plan, and an important focus for traditional owners and Parks Victoria to plan for a new future for the facility, reinvigorate it, allow it to provide more opportunities for information, part of broader services like guided walks through the park. So we're going to be doing more and more work on what the reinvigorated Brambuck can be. And the last point's what we hear a lot from the community is how to connect with the knowledge of traditional owners, how to hear from traditional owners, how to participate in programs that are based on the cultural heritage and the people. So a really important aspect is how do we continue to share information, knowledge and connection directly with traditional owners. Thanks, Cole. Healthy country, as I touched on, is predominantly about the plants, animals, the biophysical landscape. So the draft plan talks about how traditional owners can continue to share knowledge and how that's applied in our day-to-day park management, all the way through to setting new directions and strategies for the park. In some ways, recognising that combination of Western science with Aboriginal knowledge and how that applies to protecting the plants, animals and habitat. The second one's about ecosystems. I touched on already about the importance of water in the landscape, the importance of having resilient habitat for critical species, important to have the habitat as resilient so it can sustain change over time. And importantly, it takes and strategies that take away threats from pest animals, pest plants, inappropriate water regimes, whatever. It's about making sure that we're focused on a resilient habitat and the threats that apply to those really significant natural values. And fire is an important part of the landscape, both to help make sure it's a resilient, healthy ecosystems, but make sure that the management of the park and the landscape is appropriately managed for the risk to communities, to neighbouring areas, to people that visit and recreate the park. And I've already touched on the challenge we've collectively got for climate change, and the focus for our environmental programs is about resilience and removing threats, so that over time Gariwerd can continue to be one of the most special places in Victoria, Australia, the world, for its flora and fauna. Thanks, Cole. Visitor experience and tourism is how people are enjoying the landscape now, how we want to make sure people do continue to enjoy the landscape, the activities people enjoy now can continue, how the local, regional, state economy can be really strong and resilient around providing services for visitors, and we've got strong townships, and Gariwerd is seen as an important part of the, I guess, regional economy, but also state economy. So the plan does get into a lot of detail about the kinds of activities and uses and the support for economy. So the first one's capturing a few different themes around managing people through the landscape, having corridors, supporting camping at Zumsteins is a new idea, and we'll talk a bit more about camping. And also new concepts like trialling a shuttle bus to handle the carrying capacity challenges we've got at Gariwerd and many other parks across the state. We're near the final stages of implementing the Grampians Peaks Trail, and so the plan is recognising the importance of the Grampians Peaks Trail, further integration of what that means for connecting trails, trailheads, what does it mean for supporting new tourism services and offers, supporting traditional owner-led cultural tours. So the GPT is an important feature of the draft plan, and the plan really is about how to continue to build on what has been done, what will be opening up, and how can continue to support a really active walking, the place as a walking destination. I've covered Brambuck and with some recent announcements about further funding to be able to really continue to plan and implement change at Brambuck. So great thing. We've already had discussions, some concepts that are in the draft plan about what change could look like at Brambuck. We've now got some means to be able to continue the planning for that. And an important one is we're formalising where people can camp in the landscape, making it really clear where we've got areas that we want to make sure that people aren't inadvertently causing harm to the significant natural and cultural values from camping, providing plenty of areas, having areas that are still free, you can self-select, and putting a dimension or a boundary around where they are. And they're the popular ones that people enjoy now. So we're really trying to support people to be able to continue to camp on country, camp in the park, in the ways that people have, and we're just trying to make sure that we're still protecting the values that might be at risk in the landscape. Thanks, Cole. A key part of the planning, key part of what we hear from community is around creating a contemporary management to rock climbing and bouldering. It's been something that's grown dramatically over the recent decades. We haven't had a management framework in place. It has been unplanned, unregulated, and so the draft plan is really a reset about what is climbing in the landscape. Really importantly, the plan talks about where climbing can continue to occur and the diversity of where the climbing offer is through the landscape. So first things first, climbing is continuing in the landscape as per the draft plan. What we've put in place is clear information about where the proposed sites would be, where climbing could continue. Climbing can, once we do further assessment work, where climbing could occur with the right controls, mitigating strategies, and also areas that we've already identified as having significant natural and cultural values, and climbing's not appropriate from when the final plan's complete. We've introduced in the draft plan the concept of a permit. The permit's there to be able to provide a really great mechanism to engage with climbers about where you can climb, what the conditions are, things like further on the screen there, the use of chalk, temporary protection, where climbing areas change over time. As we do further assessments and further climbing areas become available, being able to communicate that to people. And also very practically, as a park ranger by heart, want to avoid having the park dominated by signage about where you can, where you can't, what the conditions are. So the permit, a free permit, provides a great mechanism for us to provide complex information to climbers, gives them the mechanism to be able to climb. The logic in the plan is you can't climb in the park unless it's in one of those designated areas and you've got a permit that is the means to be able to find all that information about the conditions, so you can climb in many ways safely. And I've touched on in the third point there that we've got concepts in the draft plan about things like the colour of chalk, trying to reduce any visual impact. We recognise chalk's an important safety measure, as are things like protection, whether it's bolts in the landscape or temporary protection. So the plan has everything from where you can climb and then how things like chalk and temporary protection measures can apply. We've got no events, no climbing events to be held in the park, and that's to manage the surge impacts of having large events where the primacy of the plan and the park is to protect the values. So that's another feature there. I'll keep on going, Cole. I've done a quick summary there of a lot of complex information about climbing and bouldering. We also, obviously the plan covers a whole range of other activities that people currently enjoy now. So quickly going through, continuing obviously bushwalking and hiking in the landscape on designated tracks. Cycling would continue the way it is now, with mountain biking only on public roads. We recognise there's other opportunities in the landscape for mountain biking, but we've still got cycling occurring, and good information in the draft plan about that. Dog walking, as is now, is prohibited within the national and state parks, but in other reserves in the landscape can continue on the specified on-lead areas. Campfires, we have campfires in the landscape now. The draft plan has for campfires to be able to continue in fire pits. So it's using fire pits that are in the landscape, not digging them in an unplanned way and causing the risk of impacts to natural and cultural values. Camping I've touched on, as in the we've got plenty of campgrounds and campsites in the landscape, and it's reinforcing that camping can continue in those designated areas. Hang gliding and parasailing was a feature of the park decades ago. The current management plan in effect doesn't permit it, and the draft plan is keeping that same settings. Covered rock climbing and bouldering, and horse riding, to continue on those designated tracks that it can people can ride now and into the future. Thanks, Cole. And final slide, lots of information, everyone. Where we apply through all our management planning the notion of zones and overlays to describe where areas that are protected, and protected often in legislation, about where they're reference areas or remote natural areas where it's really about protecting what the landscape has been and it's not about change, all the way through to having overlays and areas that are all about activity and people enjoying the landscape. We've had a challenging conversation in recent years where a lot of the recent change about where people can climb has been through the special protection areas that are in the current plan. What we've sought through this draft management plan is to be able to describe to anyone where you can climb, not have the challenge of people understanding what is a special protection area, where is it, what does it mean for my activity. So we're trying to remove that ambiguity or uncertainty for people to understand what can happen in the landscape. And probably the final one before I hand over to Cole there, the notion of sky country. It's we plan for the park, the sort of the terrestrial elements of the park where we're protecting the plants, animals, and enabling use. What this plan does, which I think is a really powerful and wonderful thing, is talks about the intangible heritage that traditional owners have about sky country, where ancestors are in the landscape through the stars, and provides the overlay to protect those landscapes that are really special and important. We had an image up earlier of one of them at the balconies, and how we can connect people with the sky country. What does it mean? And also make sure we're protecting that from any harm. But really a great educative way to connect the stars and the land and the heritage. Thanks, Cole. Over to you. Next steps.
No worries. Thank you, Stu. As you can see, there's been a wealth of work and there's a lot of information there, but there's also a lot of information that you can access further online. So as I've said several times, it is currently in draft. This is a very standard approach with our land management planning, that we prepare a draft, we put it out for consultation and feedback, and then we do some further work before we finalise it. We also obviously had the additional early engagement to understand people's views and aspirations last year. We've got 10 weeks for it. It's a relatively long time, longer than some of ours, but that's acknowledging that this is a plan with a high level of interest, but also we're coming up to Christmas. So launched last Wednesday, 11th of November, and will be open until the 24th of January. We really want everyone who's got any interest in this landscape and in the plan to provide either a survey online, so engage Vic, or you can email through a submission at parkplan@parks.vic.gov.au. All this information is available online. You can obviously get in touch as well. We will accept hard copies if you prefer to mail in, but our preference is email. We wanted to flag, there's a lot of supporting document that you can find on Engage Vic. So the full plan is there. So it's about 159 pages. There's also summaries of some key elements. There's many, many maps. I think the back of it, there's at least 11 maps that walk through the different designated climbing areas, as well as zoning maps, fire impact maps, landscape maps. We've shared a lot of summary reports on the archaeological work that was done, so there's quite a lot of detail there, and perhaps probably one extensive sharing and preparation work we've done and provided with a draft management plan like this. There's also a decision-making framework that explains how we went through the process of determining different designated rock climbing areas. What's actually really interesting is there's a traditional owner cultural values report up there. So that was work we did. We met with many traditional owners in a workshop earlier in the year, and we learnt more about, the connection to country, the stories associated, and that intangible heritage you may have heard us talk about before. So the stories and the connections beyond, the physical remnants that we find. That's all up there. There's detailed maps and there's lots of frequently asked questions. All feedback that we get via the survey or through submissions and emails will be reviewed, all pulled together, synthesised and analysed, and Parks Victoria and traditional owners will consider this feedback and make necessary amendments to the plan. And there will be, with the final plan, a release of the summary of the feedback that we got. Now, that's a lot of talking from us, and thank you for your patience. We really want to spend the remaining time hearing from you. I've got a few questions here, and I'll go through them and I'll ask them, and then I'll throw to Stu or Josh or someone else on the line to provide an answer. So the first one we've got, which unfortunately we may not be able to answer today, but we'll see if anyone can. Do we know yet a reopening date for Brambuck? Is that something Josh or Stu you might be able to help with, or is this something we might have to take on notice?
I don't know the exact, Stuart here I should say, don't know the exact details, Cole, but it's the best I can say, it's imminent. It's not a long period of time. It'll be sooner rather than later. That's probably the best I could say, but we can make sure that our information to the public on that, we can take on notice and get better. Thanks.
Okay. The next question I'm going to throw to you, Josh. What does formalising, I'll just reiterate, Josh Jacuzzi is the manager of park planning at Parks Victoria. What does formalising camping mean? Will informal remote camping for overnight walks still be possible?
Thanks, Cole. Good evening, everyone. So I guess the proposal in the draft plan is drafted is that we are I guess, moving away from dispersed camping. So I guess what the work the team has done is to acknowledge that we have many camping sites that people already use, and we're looking to formalize or designate those areas. And as Stu has highlighted earlier, is to provide an area people can still self-select. And we're hoping, I guess, through the journeys that people do of walk in the park, there will be those areas that are available that people can stop along their routes as they walk the park.
Thanks, Josh. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities for places to camp, but we will encourage people to stay in places that we've identified, but we will be identifying and recognising many areas. And one thing we want to say as well is if there are additional popular areas that people camp right now that might not be in the plan, please let us know and we'll make sure they're recognised. I'm going to keep with you, Josh. Next one is, what about trail running events? There's very few hikers who complete the GPT due to being difficult for 95% of the population, but Australian trail running community can't wait for the GPT to be finished. So trail running, Josh, is committed.
Thanks, Cole. Yeah, the plan currently supports trail running in the park, and obviously we know different types of trail running, whether it's a park run or things like that. But obviously, once it turns to an event, it triggers event permit. But the plans does support trail running. Thanks.
Thanks, Stu. Thanks, Josh. Stu, I'm going to throw the next one to you, and I'm not entirely sure, but perhaps you can provide some background on this. Why are the designated climbing areas not based more on areas that rely on temporary protection? Not entirely sure the question there, but perhaps talk about, what values are there in designated areas.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. What we've got in the draft plan, and we've got some supporting information on the Engage Vic website, is about the methodology that we've applied to review each of we capture in the plan 281 climbing areas that we've sort of apparent to us. We've gone through a process where we review whether those areas have significant natural values, like habitat for rock wallaby, for example. And also we've undertaken an enormous amount of cultural assessments for those areas that we've been able to say, are they planned to be opened or not planned to be opened? But the plan goes through that methodology of understanding what the values are at the site, where they may be at risk and we can't mitigate that risk, or areas that there may be significant values there, but we're able to put measures in place that still protect those values. So we've applied that methodology. There's lots of principles that are included in the draft plan, but in particular this supporting document that outlines that methodology, again on the Engage Vic website. And then we're working to continuing that methodology through the landscape, and that's the basis for change, and not change where people can climb, and the permit system and the like would come into effect from the final plan. So just like Cole said about the dispersed camping areas that are popular now for people, we also want to hear, have we got areas that have been climbing areas, aren't included in the draft plan? We really want to hear from people so that when we get to the final plan, they're clear, understood, and where we've done all the assessments, people understand straight away what activity can happen where. Thanks, Cole.
Thanks, Stu. And if we haven't quite captured that right, feel free to resubmit the question. I'm going to keep you there, Stu, and just jump one question, then come back up to another camping question and ask Josh. Got a message here, and thank you for the message. I'm not going to read it all out, but thanking us for the presentation. This is a New South Wales international boulderer who regularly visits the region. They'd like to ask about why does the plan consider rock climbing and bouldering as separate activities? They both involve interacting with the rocks, but are about as similar to surfing and snorkeling. Is there a way of providing information on what you information to you on the value of bouldering areas for consideration? I think it's quite a bit you can share there around the bouldering process.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. And try not to get too detailed. We've gone through the process as I've just described for climbing areas. We also recognise that bouldering is a distinctly different activity insofar as it's not using bolts or the like, it's still using chalk, but it's using other means like mats at the base. People traverse sort of across walls, across overhangs. We often have a density of people using these areas, and also a lot of the most, and our documents and supporting information outline a lot of the most significant cultural fabric, the tangible heritage, the intangible, is within that first 5 metres of the base of the land. So what we do see bouldering as having those different threats to values. What we've committed to is, so the draft plan has that there will be a limited or select number of bouldering areas that we will look to be able to establish within designated climbing areas. We still need to do that further review about where those bouldering areas could be, and our commitment is by the time of the final plan that's clear and well communicated about where those bouldering areas are. I encourage anyone, and I'm learning more and more about climbing and bouldering by the day, to have a look at how we've represented the different types of climbing, the different and bouldering in the draft plan to understand what we see as the threats to the landscape, but also the commitment to identify areas that could still be designated bouldering areas in the future. So hopefully that captured that great question.
The draft plan doesn't currently have, it's still working through what the bouldering areas would be. So we recognise that, and we really encourage input and feedback through email, and also there's options to share with us extra areas in the survey. Josh, I'm going to throw to you for 2 campground questions. Will formalised camping be provided at no fee given the free option is being discontinued?
Thanks, Cole. Yes, I guess most of the areas that are currently free will remain free, but obviously there will be camping that is associated with the GPT, and I guess the plan does specify with the camping areas that have a fee will be attached to.
So it's just not necessarily, even if they become a designated, does not mean they necessarily become fee paying overnight.
No, they'll be free, continually to be free. Thanks, Cole.
And do you know, you may or may not know this one, Josh, why close Boryang Campground? It is an established and popular spot with existing facilities.
Thanks, Cole. I guess what the team they have been looking is, Muramura is what we're proposing to replace Boryang. So it's and we think we can provide a better experience in that site. But I guess we still need to do further work, and I guess the plan does specify that if we can make Muramura work, we will replace Boryang, but it's subject to us making sure that Muramura provides a better experience.
Okay. Got 2 more for you, Josh.
Yep.
How fluid is the plan, and to what extent is it open to change based upon feedback from the community? Will the considerations of change be based on public opinion, or will it require concrete ideas and information?
I think it'll be a combination of both. Obviously, we are keen to hear from people's thoughts, because we value that people think differently. So obviously that's why I guess we are seeking feedback on the draft proposals. But also at the end of the day, we also, I guess, like the plan is a big document. It also goes into detail about why we have made certain proposals, obviously. So we need to hear, especially from our community, about what we have missed and matters that we want, that will inform any changes to the plan. But yes, the plan is draft. We've continued to say this is draft, therefore it can change.
Yeah, and those changes will be agreed with traditional owners through a process.
Thanks, Carl.
Once the last one for you before I throw it back to Stu, once the plan is approved by the Minister and the Parks Victoria Board, what are the steps to translate it into something where key elements are legally enforceable?
Thanks, Cole, and I guess you can add more into this one. So I guess, once the plan is put in place, we do have supporting regulations that help make motor strategies enforceable. We also prepare set-asides as well that help us, educate or make our directions of the plan enforceable as well. But obviously, I think, I guess for us, it's quite keen to get feedback at this moment before we get into implementation of the plan, because obviously the plan can change as well.
Right, thank you. So I've got some questions for you. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. And part of the presentation I went through was trying to build that chain between, we've got laws like the National Parks Act that govern how how the land is to be managed. Then we've got below that regulations. So we've got, using that example, national parks regulations that describe where activities can't happen, penalties for where there's non-compliance, but also it's creating that framework about where that act is to apply. The third step for that is the management plan. So the management plan is articulating where activities can't happen in the landscape, or under what conditions. And then Josh made reference to set-asides. So the set-asides then are the further detail that says where, when, how, under what conditions, the further level of granularity. What we've committed to is renewing the management plan, that is resetting, renewing how all those acts and regulations apply and values are protected. Then we will refresh the set-asides based on the final plan. So hopefully that wasn't an overly technical way. The change will be enforceable is once we have that final plan and we renew the set-asides, and then we work really hard on all the education, any change that we've committed to realising, and then and making sure that we're monitoring the behaviour and making sure people are compliant with that change. Thanks, Cole.
And I'm just acknowledging we're getting close to time, so I'm going to just commit to finishing the 21 questions we have here. Any additional ones, still submit them and we'll follow them up later. I've got 2 questions here relating to a permit, so I thought you'd be good to talk to this, Stu. So will hikers have to do a permit to hike like climbers? Why are they treated differently? And do events have another layer of management to deal with to obtain a permit?
Thanks. I'll go through them in that order. The permit for the proposed permit for climbing is a great way to be able to relay a lot of that information about what are the special conditions to be able to climb in the landscape. So to make sure the values are protected, make sure it's done safely, but there's no unintended harm or consequence from the climbing. So really the ability to climb in those areas is conditional on people working to those conditions. And so the permit's the mechanism to allow that to happen. The analogy I often used is it's like a fishing permit, fishing license, sorry, where we have areas through a plan or just how society is set up about where fishing can happen, but you've also got other conditions about how you appropriately catch fish and the like. That's analogous to the climbing. Where you walk in the park is governed by what designated tracks there are, and there's no other, and any other than the other requirements that apply to anyone in the landscape. There's no additional conditions on people bushwalking or walking through the park, unlike what type of chalk you can use and the like. So, and it's probably the last way to put it, somewhat static. You've got a trail, you understand where the trail has impacted the landscape, what mitigations have been put in place, but really you're trying to manage people to that trail. There's no additional conditions. The permit provides a great framework to allow people to climb and communicate what those conditions are. Sorry, it might have been repetitive there, but hopefully that covered it well. And yeah, additional events. So we set a management framework that applies all the time. And when we do have, and that great example about trail running, where we do have people wanting to do an event, other than where we've already said that kind of event can't happen in the landscape, we do have the mechanism through an event permit to be able to allow activity to happen in the landscape that's not ordinarily permitted. So it might be the number of people, or doing an activity, say on a management vehicle track, that mightn't be able to be for horse riders. Sorry, might be a bad example, but through a permit, we can allow under conditions and for certain times that activity to happen. So I just want to make sure people aren't, the permit for climbing is different from an event-based permit that would cover other activities in the landscape.
Thank you, Stu. The next question I'll respond to. So is there a formal mechanism within the plan for volunteer climbing groups like Cliff Care or the Victorian Climbing Club to participate directly in the determination by Parks Victoria around climbing access to specific parts of the park? So number one, in the development of this plan, which is how we're making decisions around determinations, We've had a stakeholder reference group, which has a representative from climbing. It's actually the RECC at the moment. They've been having discussions. We also have been regularly meeting with a rock climbing roundtable, and our number one message through the feedback is we've identified areas, climbing areas. Please let us know if we've got them all. We really want to hear from all climbers how we're going. The second message is in terms of determining climbing access, that is determined by traditional owners and Parks Victoria. We're equal decision makers on this. So traditional owners are their own organisation. We cannot determine who they work with or not. And they have actively been working with the Gariwerd Wimmera Reconciliation Network and have had information fed in. If you want to understand perhaps more about the different groups and perhaps why they haven't been working with Victorian Climb Club at the moment, we really recommend BGLC have put a statement out on their website. You can look for their website, go to media, that talks to it more. It's not for us to talk to it, but if you want to see some more there, we encourage you to.
Carl, do you just want to explain what BGLC is, please?
Oh, sorry, apologies. Barangi Gadgin Land Council. They're one of the 3 traditional owners that work with us and are rights holders for this area. The next question we've got is about off-track hiking and camping. So I'm going to throw to you, Josh. Is off-track hiking and camping still allowed, or when you refer to walking the park, are you just referring to only the GPT?
Thanks, Cole. Obviously, camping, we have obviously proposed that camping will be through designated areas, and we were hoping to work with the community to determine the ones that we've identified and any ones that we also would like to work in the future. In terms of obviously hiking, I guess the plan does really specify that, you know, hiking off track is supported in the park on the condition that obviously you are avoiding sensitive areas. And also avoiding areas that are of risk, obviously, because the landscape is very rocky. So I guess we are advocating that people at least, you know, understand the risk that they have to face, but also avoid sensitive areas. So yes, it's supported, but under those conditions.
Right. Thank you.
And can I add to what Josh has said? When we talk about hiking, walking in the park, it's not just Grampians Peaks Trail. There are a multitude of tracks and areas that we want people to explore on tracks. We want camping areas designated that aren't just Grampians Peaks Trail. So please, I just wanted to make sure it's understood that there's plenty of hiking and camping offer that is not associated with the Grampians Peaks Trail. Yeah. Thanks, Cole. Grampians
Peaks Trail is an addition. It's an additional to everything that's existing. Perhaps sorry, jumping around here, but still I think this is a good one for you, Josh, as you've been intimately involved in this. Is the significance of a climbing location in consideration when making a determination on a specific part of the park? If it is, how is significance determined? So, you know, we have a lot of climbing areas. How did we determine them, and how did we determine which ones to do assessments on?
Thanks, Cole. I guess that's one part of we will be trying to work with the community to get more information. Obviously, we also, again, like Cole said, we are seeking more information to help us as part of this draft proposals. But obviously, we have worked through looking at published climbing books, and we also use the CREG website to understand a bit more where those climbing areas are. Obviously, we also understand obviously CREG does also have some information about level of popularity and level of use. So I guess, you know, in making priority assessments, it was based on, can we focus more on the areas that people want use a bit more in the popular sites? So it's not, and obviously we have more assessments to be done, but it's only based on the information that we had at the point in time, and obviously we are seeking further information as part of this process.
Yeah, so please let us know. The next question, I'll touch on this because we've had this question a few times before. So given the threats to the values in the park, what are the measures going to be taken to manage hiking and access to sensitive sites such as Hollow Mountain Cave? So we have been receiving information about potential threats around some walking tracks to that area, and the local team are reviewing that and looking at that now. And, you know, when there is a threat to values, we will take action as appropriate. Just wanted to share that, and we have received those and we will be looking into them. The next question, which I think I'll show through to you, Stuart, touches on the sense of a cultural place. So if all the tangible heritage is within the first 5 metres of the areas, then why are the complete areas banned from rock climbing rather than avoiding the specific heritage areas?
Thanks for the question. Hopefully I didn't say all. Much of the tangible values are at those areas where they're quarry sites, they're rock art sites close to ground, and the like. So please, and if I did say all, that's in error. The assessment is a combination of the tangible values, as I've articulated, where you might have intangible values as well. So whether it's a rock overhang and it's what that means for traditional owners and the potential probability of rock art as an example. And also the Aboriginal Heritage Act, and I'm not an expert, but the Aboriginal Heritage Act talks about Aboriginal places. So it's not just the tangible value being at a particular location. It's that combination of what that tangible value is, what the intangible values are, and ensuring at a place those values are able to be protected and that place is able to be protected. What we've sought to do, and we're really keen for feedback, is where there are areas that might be at scale climbing areas, where we can still understand what that Aboriginal place is that needs protection, but where there might be opportunity to break up a climbing area into two areas. We have done that for a few sites within the draft plan, so hopefully people can see that. But we also want to continue both assessing where the values are and taking that approach I articulated, that still understand, are there measures in place that we can still allow climbing that doesn't cause that risk. So it's still, I guess, the same principles as there. When we understand what the values are, can we still allow things to happen? And when we get to that threshold, we think it's too great a risk, that's where we've gone to the climbing not allowed category. So hopefully we're still on a journey to continue to find out more, continue further assessments, and hear from the community where we could take an approach to still protect values, but allowing activities like climbing to happen at any location. Thanks, Cole.
Want to reiterate too that some of those areas that are currently not designated is because there's also environmental values, and it's about habitat, particularly of endangered species, which is quite a broad space. I've got one last question here, and I've had a little scan of the ones in the back, and one more there as well, and then we'll wrap up. So how can the continued deaths at Mackenzie Falls be allowed in this plan? Is it not considered a threat to the cultural values of traditional owners?
I'll take that, Cole.
Yep.
Yeah, and this has been a great discussion with traditional owners. We're not satisfied right now about the level of deaths that have occurred for people at Mackenzie's Falls. We want to continue to do further planning to make the area safe, make the area still as an attractive destination. It's a really wonderful, popular place. We want to do other things like enhancing, say, the car parking and other facilities there, especially still on that journey from where it's been bushfire impacted. I've heard myself, so I can say it, from traditional owners, that the notion that people coming onto country and not being safe and the drownings that have happened are important. Again, I'm just reflecting what I've heard from traditional owners. So what we need to do is do some further planning to make sure that the area is safe, the walking trails, the car park, everything is only enhanced. So we've got more planning to do, and just of note, the Victorian government's announced this week for some funding to help with that further planning and change there. That first and foremost is about safety. Thanks, Cole.
Thanks, Stu. And there's just two questions that quite relate to each other in the ones that weren't published that I want to share, because I think it's a really great way to wrap it up. And that is, has the government committed funding to make these aims happen, or, what is the extra levels of staff sufficient to make these fantastic proposals be enjoyed? So how do we make this happen, become reality?
I'll give a really simple answer. Let's hear what needs to be in the final plan. Let's finalise the plan. As I've touched on a couple of times, government is investing in change even this week. So we've got a great forum to be able to continue to deliver things like making Mackenzie's Falls safer or reinvigorating the offer at Brambuck. So government is investing. We have a park that we're continually looking at the quality, the scale of, say, our environmental programs, and where government's investing in those programs. And we're continually challenged, like everyone in the public service, about we've got aspirations for just how much we want to continually to invest in great facilities, great environmental programs, great education programs, and the like. It's never enough. But what I'm always buoyed by having a plan is it creates a great framework for new partnerships, new investment, and a real roadmap for where people, government, philanthropists, anyone can continue to invest in the park. Thanks, Cole.
Great, thanks, Jude. Stu there was referring to, there were some announcements by the government this week about money to help, particularly with Brambuck, which is really interesting, which is great to hear. Just want to share the slide again. Thank you all for listening tonight and your patience. Probably like me, you're probably in a hot room and we're finally allowed to get out and travel. So we really do appreciate you making the time for this. This is a shorter version. There will be some more sessions happening next week. There's 2 and there's 2 the week after, and they're more of the numbers are capped, but they're more of an active discussion. So if this has sparked an interest and you want to go to one of those, there's still spaces available. As we reiterate again and again, the plan is a draft. We really want to hear from all of you. Hearing from you really helps us make this as robust and supported as we can. So please jump on Engage Victoria if you haven't already, or email through to us. That would be greatly appreciated. That's it. I'm going to say thank you, Stu. Is there any final words you want to say?
Getting myself off mute. No, I really appreciate some really insightful and diverse questions. I want to recognise all the work that's gone into this plan, and it's only going to be better, richer, and a great blueprint for the future of the landscape through everyone's feedback and submissions. So I just wanted to, and I wanted to thank Cole and everyone else that's helped with hosting this tonight. So on behalf of the Parks Victoria team, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, and have a lovely night. Bye.